The Mahabharata is an Indian epic in its original Sanskrit, probably the largest ever composed. Combined with a second great epic, the Ramayana, it embodies the essence of the Indian cultural heritage. The Mahabharata is the story of a dynastic struggle culminating in an awesome battle between two branches of single Indian ruling family. The account of the fight between the Kurus and the Pandavas for the fertile and wealthy land at the confluence of the Yamuna and Ganges rivers near Delhi is enhanced by peripheral stories that provide a social, moral, and cosmological background to the climatic battle. So, to begin, may this ancient Bharata become a jewel girl land that will never leave you. Duryodhana causes all creatures to be slain and wets the earth. He fans the flame of hostility that at last consumes all. But in my opinion, life is taken with every breath. What do you think? Bhima's wrath is unappeasable. He will never let this story be lost in the empty world. Arjuna is the prince of all bowmen. With spells of bewilderment, he guards these pagans embellished with elegant expressions and conversations, human and divine. Nakula is dark and Sahadeva is fair. They guard Arjuna's chariot wheels. In this whole world of men, they have not their equals in beauty and strength and excellence of conduct. Yudhishthir is the embodiment of all manliness. He is kind hearted, cease to fight him, do not court defeat. Karna disdains to fight except alone. He wears a cape fastened at his shoulder by a round clasp. He looks at me with hard eyes. But if love has any cause, he is my ancient friend from another life, angry at me after a little quarrel. Whereas the poet tells you, oh, beware, beware of reality, beware of justice. Enough of waiting and waiting, you are in danger. Hearing this, Bharata, who can bear listening to other stories, which sound like the braying of an ass. The world is beautiful everywhere I look. Look, see the lights and the happiness, the singing of all the fine presents. Victory, victory to the great king, no loss to you. But the images perspire in the temples. The ways of Dharma are subtle and hard to find. After this, I am still alive. I think I have no death. Forgive me, I'll go into the forest. The first chapter is A Mine of Jewels and Gems. Sati, the storyteller, told this tale to his friend Sonaka in Naimisha forest. Bending with humility, Sati came wandering through the wood in the evening and saw before him the glowing fire that burned by day and night to guard Sonaka's forest home. Sonaka asked him, lotus-eyed Sati, from where do you wander? Sati answered, from Hastinapura, from the snake sacrifice of the Kuru king Janmejaya. There I heard Mahabharata, that was first written down for the poet by the elephant god Ganesha. How was that? Sati answered, I will tell you what happened. Listen. For 3 years, Vyas composed the Mahabharata in his mind, and when it was finished, he summoned Ganesha to be his scribe. Shiva's son came and asked, why call me? Vyas replied, do you not remove all obstacles and barriers? You are the god of thieves and writers. Write down my book as I tell it to you. Ganesha twisted his trunk around. Oh, but there are books and books. Is yours a very good one? Yes. Ganesha laughed and his huge belly shook. Well, just let me get rid of all these things. He set down the conch, shells, and lotus, the discus and axe that he held in his 4 hands. And I shall write for you, but if once you stop the story, I'll leave and never return. Vyas said, on this condition, if you don't understand what I mean, you must write no more until you do. Done. The very day I was born, I made my first mistake, and by that path have I sought wisdom ever since. Listen, I was born full grown from the dew of my mother's body. We were alone, and Devi told me, guard the door. Let no one enter, because I am going to take a bath. Then Shiva, whom I had never seen, came home. I would not let him into his own house. Who are you to stop me? He raged. And I told him, no beggars here, so go away. I may be half naked, he answered, but all the world is mine, though I care not for it. Then go drag about your world, but not Parvati's mountain home. I am Shiva's son, and guard this door for her with my life. Well, he said, you are a great liar. Do you think I don't know my own sons? Foolishness, I said. I was only born today, but I know a rag picker when I see one. Now get on your way. He fixed his eyes on me and very calmly asked, will you let me in? Ask no more, I said. Then I shall not, he replied with a sharp glance. He cut off my head and threw it far away, beyond the Himalayas. Devi ran out crying, you will never amount to nothing. You have killed our son. She bent over my body and wept. What good are you for a husband? You wander away and leave me home to do all the work. Because you wander around dreaming all the time, we have to live in poverty with hardly enough to eat. The Lord of all the worlds pacified her. Looking around, the first head he saw happened to be an elephant's, and he set it on my shoulders and restored me to life. Parvati was happy again, and that is how I first met my father, said Ganesha, long, long ago. All right, said Vash. Now I will begin. And he began to tell his story to Ganesha, who wrote it on leaves. And many times Vash would compose lines that would make Ganesha pause, so he could use the time to think out the next part, said Sati. Sonaka replied, yes, that Bharata is a mine of gems like the deep ocean. Whoever hears it and understands even a small bit of it escapes the chains he has forged by deeds of good and evil. He finds high success, for Mahabharata is excellent and holds the power of victory. The one who tells it to one who has asked to hear gives him as a gift the whole earth with her belt of seas. Stay with me and tell me that tale. Sati answered, yes, I will. Listen. Long ago, when the sea was milk, Narayana said to the gods of heaven, churn the ocean and she will yield Amrita, the nectar of immortality, and precious gems and all manner of illusion and revelation. So they placed the snow mountain Mandara in the middle of the milk sea. Its deep striking roots rested on the ocean floor. Its summit rose high above the surface. The great serpent Shesha, whose hood is an island of jewels, stretched himself across the sea, his body wrapped endlessly round the mountain in the center. On one shore his tail was held by the Asuras, the dark, olden gods. On the other shore his neck was held by the Devas, the mortal gods of heaven. They each pulled in turn, so that the mountain spun first one way, then the other, while his trees and stones were thrown off into the foaming sea. First the wild moon rose from the milk sea, then the Lady Lakshmi bearing good fortune to men, then the smooth jewel adorning Narayana's breast, then Indra's elephant Aryavata, white as clouds, then Suravi, the white cow who grants any wish, then Parijata, the wishing tree of fragrance, then Rambha, the nymph, the first apsaras, and at last Dhanantwari, the physician robed in white, bearing a cup filled with Amrita, the essence of life. Suddenly poison burst fuming from the sea, and the milk became salt water. Shiva, the lord of the mountains and songs, swallowed the poison to save the world. He held it in his throat, and his neck turned blue, iridescent as a butterfly's wing. Shiva put the crescent moon in his hair as an ornament. Narayana became a woman, beautiful with desire, and bore away the cup of life. Now thousands of rivers rush swiftly to the sea as rivals for his love. In the ocean are the palaces of the serpent kings who rule the rivers of earth. And far from land, in the heart of the deep, roars the red submarine fire that boils the water into rain clouds. The changes of the moon make the ocean rise and fall with the slow rhythms of time. Wherever land ends, there the sea dances with the uplifted hands of his waves, wide as space, vast as time. The holy Ganges runs from the hills into the sea, and the Yamuna runs into the Ganges. Between the two rivers lies Karujan Gala, that is ruled from the elephant city of Hastinapura by Parikshit's son Janmejaya. Yudhishthir, the Pandava, was the Kuru king before Parikshit. But when he received Arjuna's letter, "Come to me," he made the newborn Parikshit king, then left with his brothers and their wife for the silver mountain Kailasha, and was never seen again. Parikshit ruled his kingdom well for 60 years, but then one day in the forest, angry that a deer had escaped him, the king mortally wounded a serpent who meant him no harm. Before he died, that Naga touched water and said, "Within 7 days Parikshit shall die of snake bite for his cruelty," and there was no hope for him. The woodsman heard and told the king, who left his palace and began to live night and day in a house supported by a single column, well guarded by warriors. Parikshit had but entered his retreat when an old man, dusty and torn, was seen approaching. Sometimes he was visible to the eye, sometimes he faded away as he walked again slowly and reappeared. He walked up to the guards and joined his hands in greeting, and his form shimmered and danced like heat waves in the air. Then he narrowed his eyes and spoke. "I am Takshaka, the Naga prince. Warn the king that I shall burn him." The soldiers rushed at him, but he laughed and vanished on the spot. Now, my friend, there was no way to enter or leave Parikshit's house save by the ladder, and none could climb up or down who was not loyal friend to the king. So with his court, the king stayed there until the end of the 7th day. At sunset, when the ladder was about to be drawn for the night, Parikshit saw a tiny copper-colored beetle crawling over a mango, and with a smile he picked it up. "Now I have no more fear of Takshaka than of this insect," said the king, and his court laughed as Parikshit held up that tiny beetle and set it on his shoulder. Even thus was Takshaka disguised. Instantly the Naga prince became himself and bit the king. Parikshit's courtiers and ministers fled down the ladder in fear, and as they ran in different directions, they saw Takshaka fly away through the blue sky of evening like the vermilion streak that divides a woman's hair through the center. Janmejaya then became king, and he planned a snake sacrifice to burn Takshaka. I heard of it and went to watch. There, at the proper time, Brahmanas dressed all in black set afire a great stack of buttered wood. They repeated over and over all the name of Takshaka. They poured butter into the fire from great wooden ladles, and the flames became deep red, and the smoke grew heavy and black. Their eyes were red and tearful from the smothering smoke. All around them, the spectators watched the air above the fire, waiting to see Takshaka appear. When Takshaka felt himself being drawn to Janmejaya's fire, he fled from his jewel palace in the underworld and sought refuge with Indra, the lord of heaven. Indra gave him his protection, so the Brahmanas spoke their mantras and poured their butter in vain, and Janmejaya grew restless in the hot afternoon. Then a young man came to the king's side and knelt beside him. His name was Astika, and he was born of a Naga woman. His father had hesitated to marry, yet wished for a wife, and once in the still forest very faintly asked for a woman to marry him. There a Naga girl heard him, and he married her, true to his word. Astika looked upon the world of men with an even eye. He bent his head, touching his brow with his hands, joined in Namaste, and said, "Majesty, I am Astika. I wander here and there throughout your kingdom of Karujangla. Let those we cherish be happy. Let our kings and our princes live long. Janmejay know that Takshaka is in heaven with Indra. The king replied, Welcome to you. He called his Brahmanas and told them where Takshaka was hiding and said to Astika, For this ask of me any gift and I will give it. Astika answered, Be patient, Majesty, soon I shall ask. The Brahmanas began to call down Indra and Takshaka both. And in a few moments the Lord of the Rain appeared in his chariot drawn by misty grey horses hanging in the air over the fire. There was no sign of the Naga. The Brahmanas cried out, Lord of Heaven, give us the Naga prince or we will cast you both into the flames. Indra looked down with the unblinking eyes and a flashing thunderbolt appeared in his hand. He took deadly aim at the Brahmanas and raised his arm to destroy them. But the mantras and spell had overcome Takshaka as soon as Indra turned his attention from him, and he was hanging in the mid-air above the fire between Indra and the Brahmanas. Seeing this, Indra vanished, for there was nothing more he could do for the serpent. But the Brahmanas still could not make the Naga prince fall into the flames because Astika whispered softly, Stay, stay. Then he turned to Janmejay and said, Majesty, stop the sacrifice. Janmejay smiled. Astika, instead I'll give you gold and silver, he said. Gold and silver I do not want, but half my blood is of Naga race. Beautiful women and white cattle I will give you instead. Majesty, women and cattle I do not want, but the Naga prince is dear to me. Then I give you his life. You have saved him from me, and you have done it well. And this in return, Majesty, you have no fear of any serpent, but think serpents of good fortune. Live in peace here with your dear ones. Let it be so for all my people. Astika said, It will be so, Majesty, for all your people. And Takshaka vanished from our sight. When he entered his palace, Janmanjaya Raja found waiting for him a dark man dressed in deerskin and bark, who bore his 150 years with calm and dignity and sparkling eyes. Vaisa, sit beside me, Janmejay. The jeweled Naga escaped you, and you bear him no malice. That is good. The king called for water and washed Vaisa's feet. I bow to you, he said. You who knew my ancestors, will you not stay and tell me your story? Will you not untie the knots of my heart? I am old, Bharata. With my dark blue skin, I am like a thunder cloud, holding the memory of lightning, of love and terror and the deeds of heroes. But I have not come alone, and I have told my story in the forest to my companion, Vesampanya, who waits outside. He is young and fair, and wears one silver earring in the shape of moonbeam. I will stay while he tells it to you, and I myself will listen. Janmejay and Vais found Vesampanya outside in the spreading shade of an old tree. Janmejay bowed to him with joined hands. Vesampanya, in his white robe, said, Excellent Majesty, I shall be pleased to tell you. Let Vais sit with his back against the tree, and let all who wish to hear gather around us now. Then Janmejay and Astika and myself and many of the Kurus sat down under that old tree. Vaisampanya sat beside Vais and said, Welcome, now hear from me the Mahabharata. Listen, Majesty. You are born in the lunar race, descended from the moon, descended from the Bharat and Kuru. You are Arjuna's grandson. I begin my story with the Kuru king Pratipa. In his old age, he was still childless. So, with his king, he left Hastinapura and lived in the forest near the Ganges. There he hoped fortune would favor him with a son. At that time, the dead king, Mahavishya, sat in heaven listening to Lord Brahma explain the riddles of all creation to a large audience of the faithful. But Mahavishya was bored. He sat on the edge of the group and his attention strayed here and there until he saw Ganga, the beautiful river goddess, walk by. White as moonbeams, her silken robes flowed over her body as she moved, concealing little and suggesting much, as though she walked through silver water. The Queen of Rivers felt his glance and their eyes met. Mahavishya began to perspire, and this never happens in heaven until one is ready to be reborn. He removed his heavenly garland, which had remained fresh and fragrant for centuries, and watched the jasmine and ginger flowers fade and turn brown. He smiled at the goddess and vanished from heaven. The beautiful Ganga wishfully followed his soul with her heavenly eyes as it fell back to earth and entered the womb of Pratipa's queen. Pratipa sent his wife and his son Shantanu back to the city, but to give thanks to Shantanu's birth, he himself remained in the forest as before. One evening he was sitting on a rock under a tree by the river when a wonderfully beautiful lady arose from the water and walked over to him. She smiled down at him and sat on his lap. Pratipa asked, "Whoever you are, how can I help you?" Ganga brushed the wet hair from her smooth forehead and said, "I am in love, Majesty." Gently the king put his arm around her. "When a woman asks, one cannot ignore her," he said. "But you sit on my right thigh, where a daughter belongs." "Yes," said Ganga, "I have loved him since before his birth to you." Pratipa answered, "When he is grown, I will tell Shantanu that you are waiting for his love." "Blessed be you, Pratipa. I will meet him by the river many years from now." Then Ganga dove into the flowing water and was gone. She swam upstream through the gate where the Ganges falls from heaven, and was again in the realm of the gods. There she lay on a warm stone, drying her long dark hair in the sun, smiling to herself when the 8 Vasu gods, who are Indra's attendants, came to see her looking downcast and guilty. "What is it?" asked Ganga. "What's the matter with you?" Pravasa, the shining spirit of dawn, shuffled his feet uneasily and said, "Ganga, we have a favor. I mean, look here, would you be our mother?" Ganga laughed. "You'd better tell me what you have done first." Pravasa gave her a crooked smile. "Brahma's son Vashishta has cursed us to be born on earth." "Well, that's not so bad. But what did you do?" "My wife talked me into stealing Surabhi, the cow of wishes. Vashishta thinks more of that cow than of all heaven and earth. And even though he wasn't around, I didn't want to do it. My wife has a friend on earth and she wanted to let her drink some of the magic milk so be free from disease and old age. I wanted just to take the milk, but my wife looked hurt and at the same time innocent as the cow herself. We were all of us there, and the other women joined in, wondering aloud why I didn't love my wife enough to, well, you know." Ganga had a wide smile on her face. "I am polite enough not to laugh," she said. "Even though you would if it had happened to someone else. How could you fall for something like that?" "Ganga, I refuse to explain what you know very well yourself," said the Vasu. "It is enough to say that we in turn spoke to Suravi and talked her into coming for a visit with us down to earth. While we are gone, Vashishta returned, discovered us with the magic in sight, and gave us his curse for our trouble." "And why come to me?" asked the goddess. "Well, we knew you had plans. Say no more. You will all be born to the wife of Shantanu, the Kuru king." When Shantanu was a young man, Pratipat told him, "When you were very young, a fair maiden came to me and told me of her love for you. If you should meet her secretly near the Ganges, ask not who she is, nor whose, nor from where she comes, but take her for your wife by my word." Soon after this, Pratipa died and Shantanu became the Bharata king. One day, as he rode along alone beside the Ganges, he met there a maiden shining with beauty, dressed in transparent watery blue silk, trimmed with gold and wearing a belt of pearls. Each looked and looked into the other's eyes, and each longed to look there forever. Softly, the king said, "Beautiful one, of whatever race you are, goddess or Naga, Asura or Apsara, or human being as myself, return with me now as my queen." Ganga smiled at him and lowered her eyes. "I would like to do this," she said. But if I become your lady, you must never ask my name, nor speak to me unkindly, nor interfere with anything I do, or I will leave you. I promise. Come, sit beside me. Here in this city they were married, and every year Ganga bore a son to Shantanu. But for 7 years she threw each child into the Ganges and drowned them there, saying, "This is for your good," and so freed all the Vasus from Pravasa. Shantanu said nothing to her about this, for he loved her and remembered his promise. 7 princes died at Ganga's hands, but when she carried her eighth son to the river and held him over the water, smiling to her baby's eyes, the king cried out, "Stop! Do not kill him." "Then take him as my gift," said Ganga. "I shall not free him from life." Then the goddess stepped into the river that flows from heaven to beneath the sea. "My lord, I am Ganga, and I leave you now with your son." Shantanu held his child at his breast and turned away without a word. He was a good king. He kept the Kurus in peace, and by the touch of his hand he could remove old age from any man. Bharata, to the south, lies the land of cherry. When Shantanu was a boy, the cherry king, Upachara, once left his palace to hunt in the forest. It was springtime, but every tree and vine of the forest was in flower. Bees swarmed over the blossoms, birds sang and called to each other, and a fragrant breeze sighed gently through the wood. When he had gone a little ways, Upachara sat, sat down to rest under the flowering tree. He closed his eyes and fell asleep, and he dreamed of his beautiful queen who waited for him at home. When he awoke, he found that his vital seed had left him and fallen on a leaf nearby. The king summoned a hawk to carry that leaf to the queen. The hawk flew away with it into the sky. But another hawk attacked him, thinking that he carried food, and the leaf fell into the Yamuna, where a mother fish swallowed it as it touched the water. That fish made her way upstream to Shantanu's kingdom and was netted from the river many months later. When the fisherman cut her open, he found in her belly a baby girl, whom he raised as his daughter, naming her Satyavati. She grew up to be a very handsome, but had always about her the smell of fish. She spent her days sculling a swallow boat along the Yamuna, helping her father tend his nets. One day, the wandering minstrel Parashara came to the riverside, and when he saw Satyavati, he said to her, "Accept my love today, beautiful one." Satyavati blushed. "Now it is broad daylight," she whispered, "and there are people all up and down the riverside." "But leave your boat and sit by me," answered Parashar. When she was by his side, he sang a magic song that made thick fog cover the river and the land, concealing everything. They went in her boat to a little island, and while the boatmen on the river called out to avoid collisions all around them, Satyavati gladly gave herself to her lover. In return, he removed the smell of fish from her and instead made her fragrant as flowers. On the river island, Satyavati gave birth to the poet Vas. Parashar took him away into the forest, and Satyavati returned to her father. King Shantanu named him Bhishma. It was his great happiness to see him grow into manhood, strong and intelligent with broad shoulders and fair skin. Once near the Yamuna, the king caught the fragrance of flowers in the season where there are no flowers. Following his nose, Shantanu discovered Satyavati, took her up on his royal chariot, and carried her to Hastinapura as his queen. Bhishma was pleased to see his father so happy, and as his marriage gift, he told him, "Let your child by Satyavati rule the kingdom after you, and I will protect him and his children as long as I can." "Why do you offer this to me?" asked Shantanu. "Majesty," replied Bhishma, "I care not to be king, not to marry, but I would rather make our race the strongest in all the land by my energy." Shantanu said, "Then take these words as my gift, Bhishma. Death will never come to you so long as you wish to live. He will dare to approach you only when you have given him permission." Santanu's son by Satyavati was named Vichitravirya. When he was youth, Shantanu made him king and retired alone to the forest. There by the Ganges, in the hermitage where he had been born, he lived all alone until he died. I'll soon make a part 2 of this Mahabharata.